At 5:30 in the morning on September 3rd, 2008, the workers of a small factory in DeWitt, Nebraska, population 572, were called into a meeting before the sun came up. They were told that the plant where some of them had spent their entire adult lives was closing, and that the tool it made was moving to China. The tool was the Vise-Grip, the locking pliers, invented in that town by a Danish blacksmith, patented in 1924, and built there, and only there, for more than 80 years. Here is the thing about a Vise-Grip that makes this story hurt. The entire genius of the tool, the whole reason it exists, is that once it clamps down, it does not let go. You can take your hand off it and it holds. Farmers welded them onto broken machinery and left them there for decades. Shipyard workers in World War II clamped them inside the hulls of Liberty ships and just kept building. It is, mechanically, the most loyal object in the American toolbox, and everyone who ever owned it let go. The family let go. The corporation let go. And when the town got a miracle, when the factory actually came back to life, and workers walked back through their own doors, America itself let go. One more time. Vise-Grip, the unbreakable tool America let go twice. Every week on this channel, we tell the stories behind the machines in your garage, the empires, the betrayals, and the fine print. If those stories are worth 20 minutes of your week, give this video a like and subscribe. The story begins not in a factory. It begins at a blacksmith's forge with an immigrant who had already failed at 2 other businesses. DeWitt, Nebraska, at the turn of the 20th century, was the kind of town the railroad made and the railroad could unmake. Platted in 1872 along the Burlington and Missouri River line, a few hundred people, a main street, grain and cattle country in every direction. It was not a city of ideas. It was a city of chores, and chores are where tools come from. William Peterson arrived from Denmark around 1901, a journeyman blacksmith about 20 years old. And it is worth knowing that the man behind one of the most successful tools in American history did not succeed at much of anything first. He tried farming. It didn't take. He tried manufacturing motorcycles of all things in rural Nebraska. That didn't take either. What took was the forge, a blacksmith shop in a town of 600, shoeing horses and mending the broken iron of other people's livelihoods. And at that forge, working alone, Peterson kept running into the same wall every solo blacksmith knows. To work hot metal, you need one hand for the hammer and one for the tongs, which leaves no hand to hold the work steady. He needed a tool that could clamp onto a piece of metal and hold it, in his words, in a vice-like grip, and keep holding it after he let go. A third hand. Understand what that problem actually cost him. Every workaround was bad. Clamp the work in the big bench vise, and you can't move it to the fire. Wedge it, and it slips when the hammer lands. Hire a boy to hold the tongs, and you're paying wages to a pair of hands. Every blacksmith in every town on earth had faced this since the Iron Age, and every one of them had decided to live with it. Peterson, the man who had already failed at farming and failed at motorcycles, the man who arguably could not afford to live with anything, decided not to. So he built the missing hand himself, and the way he built it tells you who he was. First, he cut the idea out of cardboard to see the geometry move. Then, he carved it in wood. Then, only then, he forged it in steel. In February 1921, he filed his first patent, number 1,392,443, granted that October for what the paperwork called simply a wrench, a plier with a jaw you could preset with a screw in the handle. Useful, but not yet magic. The magic came with the second patent, filed January 1923, granted April 8th, 1924, number 1,489,458. This one added a pressure strut inside the handles that moved past its own center point as you squeezed. And that changed everything. Because of a piece of mechanical wizardry we'll break down properly in a moment. Past that center point, the tool snaps into a locked state. It grips with enormous force, and it keeps gripping with no hand on it at all. It cannot slip open. It has to be deliberately released. He called it the Vise-Grip. The trademark records show the name in use by November 1922, registered in 1923. And then William Peterson, 40-something immigrant blacksmith, did his own sales and distribution. He loaded pliers into the trunk of his car and drove the gravel roads of Saline County and beyond, selling them for $1.25 to farmers and mechanics, men who would pick up this odd little plier wrench, clamp it onto something, take their hand away, and stare. The tool sold itself one demonstration at a time. By 1934, there was a real company, Peterson Manufacturing, and in 1938, it opened its first true plant in the most DeWitt way imaginable, inside a dead drugstore on Main Street with a staff of 37, a failed farmer, a dead drugstore, a town of 600. Remember how small this all is, because within a few years, this tool would be riding to war on every ocean on Earth. First, let's do what this channel does and actually understand the tool, because the mechanism is the whole story, and by the end of this video, it will feel like a prophecy. Open your hand and squeeze an ordinary pair of pliers. The grip you get is exactly as strong as your hand, for exactly as long as your hand lasts. The moment you relax, the jaws relax. A vice grip breaks that bargain using something engineers call an over-center toggle, the same principle that keeps a folding card table locked open. Inside the handles is a linkage, a pivot, a strut, and an adjusting screw that sets the jaw width. As you squeeze, the strut rotates toward a line drawn between its two endpoints, the center line. Squeezing gets harder and harder as you approach it, because you are levering the jaws shut with tremendous mechanical advantage. And then the strut crosses the center line and snaps past it. Click. The geometry inverts. Now, the clamping force isn't fighting to open the tool. It is holding the tool shut. The harder the workpiece pushes back, the more firmly the linkage seats itself. You can let go. You can walk away. You can come back after lunch, or after a decade. The jaws will be exactly where you left them, squeezing with a force no human hand could sustain for even a minute. That is why the patents could call it a wrench, a plier, a clamp, a portable vise. It was all of them. Rounded off bolt that no wrench will bite, vice grip. Two pieces of steel that need holding while you weld, vice grip. Broken tractor linkage, sheared handle, stripped fitting, 20 miles from town with a storm coming in. Vice grip, clamped on, left on, driven home. Farmers called it the third hand. Mechanics called it the tool you reach for when the right tool has already failed. Its whole identity from the first forging was a promise. I will not let go until you make me. And because the promise was real, the tool went everywhere metal goes. Welders bought them by the pair, and the dozen clamped the joint, keep both hands for the torch. Farmers kept one in every truck, because a vice grip is a plier, a wrench, a clamp, and a replacement handle for anything whose real handle has snapped. Mechanics learned that a rounded, rusted, butchered bolt that laughs at a socket will surrender to locking jaws cinched down a half turn past reasonable. People use them as temporary door handles, gear shift knobs, battery clamps, and about 1,000 other things the instruction sheet never imagined. The company said millions were being manufactured every year, and the claim was easy to believe because you never met a shop without one. Hold that thought for about 30 minutes. Through the Great Depression, the little company survived the way its customers did, by being too useful to quit. Peterson's wife worked in the shop in the early years. Growth was slow, money was thin, but a farmer who had one showed his neighbor, and the neighbor found $1.25. Then, 1938, the drugstore plant, 37 employees, and then the war came. And the tool that solved a blacksmith's problem turned out to solve everyone's. In 1941, Peterson Manufacturing took on a government contract, and the DeWitt plant went to full capacity for the duration. Think about what wartime production means for a tool like this. A rivet team on a bomber line, a machinist turning shell casings, a mechanic keeping trucks alive in a motor pool. All of them are the blacksmith at the forge, one hand short. The Vise-Grip was the cheapest extra worker the war effort ever hired, $1.25. Never tired, never late, never let go. Vise-Grip spread through the defense industries, aircraft plants, machine shops, motor pools. Even British aircraft manufacturers, an ocean away, were buying locking pliers from a village in Nebraska. And out of the shipyards came the story that follows this tool around like a legend, told so often by the men who were there that it hardened into history. Welders building Liberty ships, the emergency cargo vessels. America was launching faster than one a day, would clamp vice grips onto plating to hold their work. And rather than stop to unclamp them, they welded around them, sealed them in, and moved on to win the war. The story goes that there are vice grips entombed in the hulls of Liberty ships, still locked, at the bottom of every ocean they sailed. The tool that would not let go, holding pieces of American ships together forever. But 1941 delivered something else too, and it is the quiet first crack in this story. Patents expire. William Peterson's original patent ran out that year, and the imitators arrived immediately. Sears sold a knockoff called the Lever Jaw Wrench, and there were others with names like Grip-So and Snaplock. Peterson answered the way he always answered, at the drawing board. A second-generation design, Patent 2,280,005, issued in April 1942, kept the original ahead of its copies. But the lesson of 1941 deserves underlining, because it is the lesson of the whole second half of this video. The patent was never really the moat. The moat was the name Vise-Grip, and what that name promised. As long as the name meant DEWITT, meant Peterson, meant the real one, the copies didn't matter. The day the name stopped, meaning that no patent on earth could help. After the war, the company introduced the tool to a whole new customer at the 1945 National Hardware Show. The returning GI, the new suburban homeowner, the do-it-yourselfer. Remember that trade show. This story will walk back through that exact door one more time before we're done. Post-war, the Vise-Grip did what only a handful of tools ever do. It stopped being a brand and became a word. Nobody asked for locking pliers. They asked for the Vise-Grips, the way they asked for the crescent wrench and the channel locks, whoever actually made the thing in their hand. Across the Atlantic, the British got their own version in 1955 and called it the mole wrench, after their own local maker. The same tool, generic on two continents under two different company names. In 1957 came the finishing touch, a release lever inside the handle, so that unlocking the grip no longer took two hands and a fight. They called it easy release. And here the record demands a detail most brand histories skip, because this channel checks the patents. The release lever wasn't a Peterson invention. It was patented in 1950 by an outside inventor named H.T. Jones, and Peterson licensed it. Smart companies buy good ideas. Honest videos tell you they did. With the curved jaw, the built-in wire cutter, and that lever, the tool reached its final form. The Model 10 WR, the curved jaw 10-incher, the one in your toolbox right now, the one that has not meaningfully changed since Eisenhower was president. There is a strange kind of glory in that. Most products evolve because they must. The Vise-Grip was simply finished, and DeWitt wrote it. Through the 50s and 60s, Peterson Manufacturing incorporated, expanded, added a plant in Wisconsin, and shipped locking pliers to more than 120 countries. At its height, the operation employed somewhere between 600 and 700 people, in a town whose population never reached 600. Sit with that arithmetic. The factory was bigger than the town. Workers drove in from Beatrice and Wilbur and half of Saline County. 3 shifts, generations overlapping on the same line. Fathers, daughters, uncles, grandsons. In DeWitt, you didn't ask whether somebody worked at the plant. You asked what they did there. And the price told its own quiet story of what honest manufacturing looks like. $1.25 in the 40s, around $12 by the end of the 90s. Over half a century, the price of a Vise-Grip roughly tracked the price of everything else. No gouging on the way up, no cheapening on the way down. The tool cost what it cost to make it right, plus a living for the people who made it. Keep those numbers in your pocket. This story ends with a price tag, and you'll want the comparison. William Peterson died in 1962, and the company passed to his family. By most accounts, his son Christian ran manufacturing and held patents of his own, including one for a welding clamp. Another son built the national network of sales agents. A daughter left a teaching career to help run the business. The founder was gone, but the grip held. Family name on the building, family hands on the line. The town and the tool, one and the same thing. In 1957, remember, they had added a lever that released the grip with one squeeze. In 1985, the family used it. The decline of Vise-Grip did not arrive as a crisis. It arrived as a series of decisions that each made sense individually and were collectively fatal. Decision 1, 1985. William's grandson, Alan Peterson, then running the company, bought out the family's interests and reorganized everything under a new holding company called American Tool Companies. On paper, barely more than a name change. The plant still hummed. The pliers still said DEWITT. But two things had quietly changed. The company was no longer simply the family. It was a corporate structure with investors. And one of those investors, holding a minority stake from the very first day of American Tool's existence, was a consumer products conglomerate called Newell. Remember the mechanism. Squeeze slowly, and nothing seems to happen until you cross the center line. Decision 2, 1993. American Tool bought the Irwin Tool Company, a venerable Ohio auger bit maker with roots back to 1884. A sensible acquisition, a bigger family of brands. Also, unknowingly, the company had just purchased the name that would erase its own. Understand what Newell was, because it explains everything that follows. Newell was not a tool company. It was a company that acquired brands, dozens of them, across every aisle of the American store. Cookware, blinds, markers, storage bins. Its specialty was buying names that consumers already trusted and then making the products behind those names more efficient. Sometimes that meant smarter logistics. Sometimes it meant something else. To a company like that, the Vise-Grip was not a blacksmith's promise or a town's identity. It was a strong name with a cost structure attached, and strong names in that. Worldview. Have a useful property. They keep selling for years after you change what's behind them. The trust is a battery. You can run the lights off it for a long time. Before anyone notices, it's draining. Decision 3, 2002. Newell, by then Newell Rubbermaid, stopped being a minority anything and bought American Tool outright. 17 years after taking its first quiet grip on the company, it crossed center. And in 2003 came the change that told you everything. The whole operation was renamed Irwin Industrial Tool Company. Read that again. The Peterson name, the blacksmith, the forge, the trunk of the car, was gone, replaced by the name of a company Peterson's heirs had merely bought 9 years earlier. The Vise-Grip was now a product line. DEWITT was now a line item, and line items get reviewed. At 5:30 in the morning on Wednesday, September 3rd, 2008, the plant's workers were summoned to that meeting. Days earlier, when the rumors started, a company spokesman had declined to comment on what he called speculation and rumor. Now it was official. The DEWITT plant would close on October 31st, and production of Vise-Grip locking pliers would move to China. Roughly 330 jobs in a town of 572. A small mercy. About 40 jobs making unibit step drills went to Maine rather than overseas. Everything else crossed the Pacific. The workers were given a reason, and one of them, a man named Gary Odin, who had spent 19 years at the plant, repeated it to the Associated Press. They were told that to keep the Vise-Grip name competitive, they had to move to China. Odin gave his own summary of the morning from a bar in DeWitt, where workers had gathered, in his words, to try to forget about it. Quote, "It's a kick in the head. The AP dispatch that carried his words to the country noted, almost gently, that Nebraska was losing one of its most famous inventions. The Vise-Grip, standing alongside Kool-Aid, Raisin Bran, and the Reuben sandwich in the state's contributions to American life. On Halloween 2008, after more than 8 decades, the last locking pliers came off the line in DeWitt. By the 2010 census, the town had shrunk from 572 to 513. The factory, the building bigger than the town, went dark on Main Street, a quarter-mile of empty windows, and the customers noticed. You can still find the forum threads from those years. Farmers and mechanics comparing the new imported Vise-Grips to the DeWitt steel in their sheds. One farmer put it the way only a farmer can, and we quote it as what it is. One man's verdict in a comment thread. The 3 pair of new ones I bought this spring are already trash. Fair or not, measured or not, that sentence is what it sounds like when a battery of trust finally runs flat. 80 years of DeWitt had taught America that the name meant something. It took remarkably few years of the new arrangement to teach them to check. The tool that never lets go had been let go. That should be the end of the story. It is not the end of the story. Because in 2016, something happened that essentially never happens in these videos. Somebody bought the dead factory to bring the tool back. Malco Products, an employee-owned tool company from Annandale, Minnesota, 70 years old, makers of sheet metal and HVAC tools, purchased the DeWitt plant, reportedly negotiating the price down to $500,000, with the state of Nebraska adding a matching grant. Their plan was almost defiantly romantic. Restart American production of locking pliers in the town that invented them, in the building that built them, under a new name, Eagle Grip, because the Vise-Grip trademark had left with Irwin. Understand how rare this is in the genre of video we make here. We have told you the stories of a dozen shuttered American plants on this channel, and the ending is always the same ending. The auction, the parking lot, the plaque that never gets put up. Factories do not come back, except that on October 19th, 2018, DeWitt held a grand opening celebration, a proper small-town one, and the governor of Nebraska came to it. And when production officially began, 3 days later, the first hires walking back through those doors included 7 veterans of the old Vise-Grip plant, men and women returning, a decade later, to the same building, the same trade, the same town. Imagine punching in at the machine you were laid off from 10 years earlier. Imagine the sound of the presses starting up on a main street that had been quiet for a decade, and what that sound meant to the 500 people who could hear it from their kitchens. Malco's CEO said the words the town had waited 10 years to hear. We are proud to reopen the plant and bring manufacturing jobs back to DeWitt. In 2019, Eagle Grip planned its debut at the National Hardware Show, the same show where William Peterson's company had introduced the Vise-Grip to post-war America in 1945. The Omaha World Herald headline read, "A town renewed. If this were a movie, the credits would roll right here. This is not a movie. Here's the arithmetic the miracle ran into. An American-made Eagle Grip, forged in Nebraska by workers earning Nebraska wages, sold for $50 to $100. A Chinese-made pair of locking pliers at the hardware store sold for $10 to $25. The product was excellent. Reviewers said so, but it reached the market slowly, with almost no marketing and almost no stores. It took until April 2021 for the pliers to even be widely available online. And America, the same America that had mourned DeWitt in 2008, that shares every rusted factory photo with an angry flag emoji, that swears in every comment section it would happily pay more for American-made, was asked to actually do it. 2. Pay a $60 difference on principle. Be fair to everyone in this chapter, because there are no villains in it, and that is what makes it hurt. Malco was a small, employee-owned company that risked real money on a romantic bet and marketed it on a small company's budget. The workers built a genuinely excellent tool, and the customer standing in the aisle, comparing a $15 import to a $60 Eagle Grip he had never heard of, was not a hypocrite. He was a guy with a mortgage making the same rational, individually sensible decision that everyone in this story made. The family's sale made sense. Newell's spreadsheet made sense. The customer's $15 made sense. Every link in the chain chose reasonably, and the chain still ended at an auction. In November 2022, Malco announced it was discontinuing the locking pliers line. The company's statement was the quiet kind of devastating. Despite our best efforts, we have not seen the demand needed to make this product line sustainable for our company. 63 workers in DeWitt were laid off. 3 of them were offered transfers to Minnesota. And here is the sentence that should sit in the middle of this video like a stone. Some of those 63 had already been laid off once before, from the same building in 2008. Same town, same trade, same doors, twice. In May 2023, the machinery, the presses, the forges, the CNC equipment, the tooling was auctioned off piece by piece, and the building at 100 Eagle Grip Drive was listed for sale. The last American-made locking pliers were sold off through closeout dealers, some of them shipped, fittingly, in old wooden crates. One tool writer covering the auction wrote the plainest possible epitaph: "There is no more factory." Which brings us to the secondary market, because the collectors figured all of this out years ago. Go hunting online for locking pliers and watch what happens to the prices when the listing includes one particular detail: the stamp. Old Peterson-era pliers carry their birthplace right in the steel, DeWitt, Nebraska, forged into the handle, and pairs that left that drugstore factory 50 and 60 years ago now routinely sell for more than a brand new pair costs at the hardware store. Used, worn, sometimes rusty, worth more than new. Collectors will tell you which decades to hunt, and how the markings changed over the years, and why a heavy old 10WR with the DeWitt stamp feels different in the hand, the jaws still meeting true after a lifetime of abuse. The reason is not sentiment. It is that the market, given enough time, always finds out what a thing is actually worth. Nobody is collecting the pliers made after the move. Everybody wants the ones the town made. So where does that leave the tool in your toolbox? The Vise-Grip name lives on, owned since 2017 by Stanley Black & Decker, which paid $1.95 billion for Newell's tool brands, Irwin, Vise-Grip, and all. To be clear, Stanley Black & Decker didn't close DeWitt. The plant had been dark for 9 years when they arrived. They simply bought the name the way you buy anything at that scale, as a portfolio entry, with its history priced in and its geography long since optimized. The pliers are made in China, as they have been since 2008. Production has never returned to the United States. And in 2024, Irwin celebrated a milestone with a proud marketing campaign: 100 years of Vise-Grip, a centennial honoring a Nebraska patent from 1924 for a tool built 7,000 miles from Nebraska. Not one word of the anniversary copy was untrue. That might be the coldest part. And DeWitt? DeWitt is still there. It was always a town that existed slightly on purpose, platted in 1872 when the railroad came through, first named Denison, then renamed after a famous Brooklyn preacher, the story goes, when a local benefactor's $500 church donation earned him the naming rights. A town invented by a railroad, named for a sermon, and made immortal by a pair of pliers. Its population peaked at 751 back in 1890, before the tool, mind you, and the stands at 520 at the last census. Remarkably, this is now a town that has survived losing the same factory twice, which may be its own kind of American record. There is a brick monument to the Vise-Grip, and out by the road there is a sign: Home of Vise-Grip Tools, present tense. Nobody in DeWitt has ever taken that sign down, and if you understand this town at all, you understand that nobody ever will. Somewhere in a machine shed in Saline County tonight, there's a pair of Vise-Grips with DEWITT NEBR stamped into the steel, bought for $1.25 by somebody's grandfather, or $5 by somebody's father, clamped onto something, or hanging on a nail, jaws locked, spring waiting, 60, 70, 80 years old, and it works exactly as well as the day it left the drugstore factory. The reason is not sentiment. It is geometry and honest steel. Squeeze it past center and it holds, with no hand, no attention, no loyalty required. It holds because it was built by people who believed holding was the entire point. William Peterson built a tool that cannot let go, and the century that followed tested everyone who touched it. The family let go in 1985. The corporation let go in 2008. The country let go in 2022, $10 or $20 at a time, in 1,000 hardware aisles. Only two things in this story never once released their grip: the tool and the town. That is the mechanism. That is the paradox. That is Vise-Grip. See you in the next one. And next time, a Chicago tool company known by just 2 letters, whose sockets sat in the boxes of the very mechanics who swore by Vise-Grips that rode the same wave of imports all the way to bankruptcy, and then did the one thing almost no fallen American tool brand has ever managed. It came back.